The GOP peace talks begin. A former George W. Bush confidant is here with us to talk about the GOP civil war on this edition of Politicking. Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King. Republican leaders, otherwise known as the establishment, have begun talks to heal the wounds of a raucous primary fight, an attempt to find common ground with their presumptive nominee, Donald Trump. But can an accord be reached in time for the Republican convention in July? And can it be done with a nominee who seems unwilling to compromise in public, at least so far? And of course, can any peace be achieved that lasts through the general election? Let's get to all that with my friend, the former party insider and longtime confidant of President George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer. He is president of Ari Fleischer Communications. He joins us from Stamford, Connecticut. What can come of the Ryan-Trump meetings? They say they need to get to know each other. What's going to happen, do you think, Ari?
Well, I would much prefer unity than division, and so I would like to see the two of them walk out of the meeting and say that they're on the same page, that Ryan supports Trump, and we're going to be as united as is possible in a party that is genuinely split. But I would like to see fewer splits rather than more splits.
Ryan called the Republican primary bruising. You're a veteran of these. Was this the worst you've seen?
No question about it. You know, you've got to give credit to Donald Trump. He has captured the anti-Washington mood of a nation. There's a reason that we had 15 insiders, 2 outsiders, Ben Carson being the second outsider, and the outsider won. And the insider, Ted Cruz, who came in second, was the most outsider insider you could ever imagine as a senator. And so the American people are telling everybody that they're sick and tired of things not working in Washington, people in Washington not listening. And as much as there's a lot about Donald Trump that I don't like, I credit him for capturing that mood. And people need to start measuring politics through a different lens because Donald Trump is changing everything.
And on the other side, there's a mood on the left because of Sanders, right?
Absolutely. You see a similar issue on the left, and if it wasn't for superdelegates, it's entirely likely that Bernie Sanders would be the Democratic nominee. He's defeated Hillary now in 20 states, and in West Virginia, where they had the primary just the other night, Hillary dropped from getting 68% of the vote when she ran against Obama in 2008 to only having 38% of the vote against Bernie Sanders. You know, there's an amazing phenomenon underway in both parties, and at its core, they're both anti-Washington.
So does that make November tough to predict?
Absolutely. You know, I think Hillary goes in with the edge. When you look at the polls, when you look at all the traditional measurements, Hillary has the edge, and Donald Trump is extremely unpopular. Hillary is very unpopular. Extremely beats very. But what's so different, Larry, is Trump proved in the Republican primary that a lot of the typical measurements that people like me who've been a part of the process for years use are no longer valid. And if you try to measure Trump only by conventional political terms, you're going to miss the story. And so I'm open-minded about what can happen in November. I do think Hillary's got the edge, a significant edge, but there were recent Quinnipiac polls this week showing Donald Trump is running even with her in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, remarkably.
Your former boss isn't going to the convention, will not discuss the race, neither will his father, neither will his brother. Does that affect you?
No. You know, it doesn't. I think President Bush knows I've never been in the NeverTrump camp. I've been critical of Donald Trump. I'm against his policy of banning Muslims. I don't like what he's doing on immigration. I'm for the wall, but I'm not for deporting 11 million people who are in this country. So there's a lot of differences I have. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump is so preferable to Hillary Clinton, in my opinion, that I will vote for Donald Trump. You know, President Bush is retired from active duty politics for the most part, so it doesn't surprise me he's on the sidelines. And frankly, I think what Donald Trump said, that George Bush lied about Iraq, that's unforgivable for George Bush. That's the nonsense that some liberal Democrats have said about George Bush, and Donald Trump is wrong when he says that.
All right, but if you were to look straight on it, you're in communications, you're a Republican, her resume is maybe the best resume to ever run for the White House.
But what has she done with that resume? She's been reckless, she has been dishonest, and unprincipled. Those three are the issues that are dogging Hillary Clinton. You know, She's for the Iran deal. She presided over a Middle East that has fallen apart. She's helped abandon American allies and ushered in a vacuum in the Middle East, which has been replaced in some places with the Muslim Brotherhood and now ISIS. Across the board, you can look at Hillary Clinton's unprincipled stands. She helped negotiate a trade deal that she now repudiates because she needs to get to Bernie Sanders' left. There's never been a consistent position that Hillary Clinton has taken. And that's my argument against Hillary. I know that Hillary is unprincipled, dishonest, and reckless. Donald Trump may turn out to be those things, but we don't know that yet about Donald Trump. We do know that about Hillary Clinton.
We have had better years, have we not?
You know, Larry, it's absolutely astounding that both parties have nominated their least popular candidates to run in this cycle. It's a sad testament, but, you know, it's also proves that point I was making about people are disrupting and wanting change. And so what you have, both parties electing people that the middle of the country and the other party don't like. It would be amazing if Bernie Sanders got the nomination for the Democrats. At least he's a popular Democrat. People in the Democratic Party like him. Hillary is going to win this, if anything, by inside muscle, because she is able to get the support of the superdelegates who are essentially elected officials.
But if they're sharp, if Bernie Sanders is running ahead of Trump in all the polls.
That's right.
So if the superdelegates are smart and Hillary's lost so many primaries to Bernie and Bernie's beating Trump in the polls, why wouldn't they switch to Bernie?
Well, it's a fascinating question. You know, in the Republican side, we look at the polls and we say Donald Trump is losing, Donald Trump is losing. Should we bring in somebody else? And that's really been rejected. I can't help but wonder if that will be the case in the Democratic side. The problem is, though, Hillary is beating Donald Trump in most of the polls. And so even though Bernie Sanders is beating Trump by more, if Hillary were losing by 5 or 10 points, then I think you might see a Democratic panic and that they would turn to Sanders or potentially Biden or somebody else. The other issue, of course, that's hanging over Hillary's head is the FBI investigation. Who knows where that's going to go, Larry? But I think it's amazing to find out that a political appointee that she put at the State Department in charge of information technology, which never has political appointees, just realized, the State Department did, that he has no emails. He was able to somehow destroy or eliminate or have no records of his time being at the State Department. There's a lot dogging Hillary Clinton.
What does Trump need to do? Give me 3 or 4 things he needs to do to become, a good term to use, viable.
Well, one, he needs to pick smarter fights. Donald Trump's strength is his hot rhetoric, but he just needs to be smarter about when to use it and when not to use it. His tweet against Heidi Cruz was terrible and uncalled for in politics. As rough as politics is, you don't do that. His statement about deporting Muslims, I just deplore it. I think that's not the way we treat people in this country. If Donald Trump is smart, he'll stop fighting with Republicans, he'll start to broaden his base, attract that Republican low-hanging fruit that wants to be for him, but he's pushed away, and then set his sights smartly on the Democrats and on Hillary Clinton. That's how he'll coalesce the party. But he should keep his outsider instincts, his hot rhetoric. It's really what's drawn a lot of people who gave up on politics into politics.
Do you see any write-in independent candidate possible? Do you see some prominent person running on the Libertarian ticket?
I don't. We are still essentially a two-party system. Donald Trump won in the Republican primary, fair and square, as much as he wasn't my cup of tea. But he won fair and square. The Democrats have a different system than the Republicans, where the superdelegates have inordinate influence. I don't see anybody going outside the system, and the filing deadlines are rapidly approaching, where if somebody's going to do it, they need to do it yesterday so they can start to qualify for the ballot in all 50 states by November.
Have you spoken to President Bush about it?
I have. I visited with the president, and you know, he's long been retired from active duty politics. He enjoys talking about it, but he hasn't really been involved. He's enjoying his retirement, his painting, and supporting veterans. That's really what he does.
A puzzlement. What happened to Jeb Bush?
Well, I think Trump summed it up well. When he said low energy, he captured, and Trump has this amazing way of doing it, what people sort of don't like about politicians, corrupt Hillary. He raises those doubts to a higher level and makes people focus on that negative. I think America, one, wasn't ready for another Bush. I think, two, it was the whole sense of establishment. People were ready for an outsider. How else do you explain why Donald Trump and Ted Cruz got 80% of the Republican vote against some very well-qualified people, such as Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin, Jeb Bush of Florida, Chris Christie of New Hampshire, of New Jersey? It just was not a year for anybody who was an insider.
Donald Trump and women, how does he get them back? He's way behind among women. Women, certainly, they may have doubts about Hillary, but a lot of women would like a woman president. How does Trump deal with that?
It's a big problem for Donald Trump. He's dug his own hole, and he's dug it by being too pejorative, too mean, too belittling. And people remember these things. It's another lesson about the need for him to pick wiser fights. Donald Trump needs to make this election a referendum on Barack Obama's third term and on the economy. And if he starts to focus in a leadership style about those issues, even with his hot rhetoric and his outsider ways, he can make women forget some of the things he said, ignore it, and focus on the fact that Donald Trump is better on the economy and he represents a change in how Washington does business. And most women still don't want a third term for Barack Obama. So Trump's got some ingredients to work with, but he's just got to stop the extremist, foolish, over-the-top, outlandish, mean-spirited statements that drive people away who could be for him.
But Obama's popularity is now up over 50%.
But people don't want a third term, Larry. 70% of the American people say that America's on the wrong track. And so the favorable, unfavorable of a president is important, but it's not the most important indicator. Right track, wrong track is a much more important indicator. And as you know from history, it's very hard to have one party repeat a two-term president and keep that party in charge for 12 years. The desire for change is palpable.
If you were the advisor, who would you say that Trump should be his VP?
I don't think it matters so long as it's not a controversial or a negative selection. Because people vote on the basis of who the number one person is. I don't know anybody in 2004, for example, who said they were voting for John Kerry because John Edwards was his vice presidential selection. People focus on it for a week, 10 days after the choice is made, and then the whole debate resets to who's on top. And that'll be a focus on Trump. You know,
So
what
you
can
would
happen
say
is
the
the
same-
reverse.
you'd
If
say
you
the
make
same
a bad
thing.
selection,
Yeah,
it can
could
drive
hurt you.
people away.
You would say the same thing then about Hillary.
I would say the same thing about Hillary. Unless either person, Hillary or Donald Trump, makes such a foolish selection that they scare the American people and the American people can't vote for that ticket, the election resets to a focus on who's on top. It's interesting to me that Trump says he wants to pick somebody who is a Washington insider. As much as he's an outsider, I thought he would reinforce his strength. He has said he's going to go for somebody who's an insider. What'll be fascinating, though, is if Donald Trump's poll numbers get closer to Hillary's, like those Quinnipiac polls suggested, you'll have a lot of people who want to be his vice president. If the polls, like a recent CNN poll, show that Donald Trump doesn't have a prayer, everybody's going to run for the hills. He'll have very few people left to pick from.
Well stated. Ari, I love talking with you. Good seeing you. Hope we see you soon.
My pleasure, Larry. Great to see you.